Kevin have worked in the introduction application of lean production system in different companies, cooperatives, in different industries during, I think, many years. He started in Cardiff University, in the Lean Enterprise Research Center of Cardiff University, but he left Cardiff for incorporating to SA Partners, that is one of the really very important consulting company in this area, also in different methodologies, approaches for improving operational performance and business performance. And he's here for talking about lean and green. That is a new development. He's going to explain better than me, but I think has again is an opportunity for improving competitiveness and sustainability simultaneous and in some way continuously. I hope. Thank you. It's your turn.
Good morning. It's a real pleasure to be here with you guys. Thank you for the introduction, Joaquin. Thank you for the very interesting talk by Ramón. It's very good. And it's a real pleasure to be back here in University Politécnica Madrid. I have always enjoyed coming here and enjoyed the company. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about why does it matter in the agri-food sector to think about lean, technology, industry 4.0, etc., etc. It's going to be talking about the why before the what. So what is the problem, or why does it matter that we think about these things? If you think about it, 100% of the companies out there know what they do. So they make microphones, or they make shirts or ties. 100% of the businesses out there know what they do. Very few businesses actually know why they do it. So if we listen to Ramón mentioned about the fact that technology for the sake of technology is useless. Of course it is. It's the reason that we need it. What is the issue, what is the problem that we're trying to address? And Ramón was emphasizing this. I'm trying to hopefully to make this more relevant to the agri-food sector, if you like. Now, if you take the food industry against the manufacturing industry in general, I'm talking about food and drinks manufacturing versus manufacturing at large. While the manufacturing industry is becoming better and better year over year with the use of technology, with the use of mass production, lean production, agile production, other concepts. Unfortunately, food and drink technology is going completely the opposite direction. Here is the data. So you can see the inventory turns since 95. Over there, if you see the number behind the chairs. Since 95, the inventory turns means how many times you turn your inventory every year is going up, means that you are turning around your inventory more and more. It's a good news. It means becoming leaner. That's by definition leaner. And if you look at the food and drinks industry, it's getting worse and worse year on year. I showed this data at the office of at the Food and Drinks Federation in the United Kingdom 2 years ago, and everybody hated me because it's really bad news. I think they were expecting good news, but I was delivering bad news. I think they decided to ignore me conveniently. But the reality is that this means waste in our industry. And I've worked for the past 15 years, I've been in lean. I've mostly worked with the food and drinks industry. So I hope that we can do something about it, and there's a lot we can do about it. In fact, if you think about the average inventory turn for the food industry, which is less than 10, if you take the last few years, is maybe 8 or 9, around 9. If you think about the automotive sector, on average, is 15. They turn around the inventory 15 times a year. Food and drinks industry is about half, is about 8. 9. And if you take Toyota as a benchmark for leanness, they turn around the inventory on average 35 times a year. Means that they keep the inventories very, very low. This means that your cash-to-cash flow is much better. It means that from a finance point of view, of course, you're much healthier. And if you take Dell computers, I think that computer over there, in fact, is 80 times. So guess who makes the money? And no wonder that the margins in the food and drink sector is so low. This is but one of the reasons. Right, so we kind of know the problem. Now, what is happening in the food and drink sector? I call it the leaky pipe. So if you think about money flowing from one end, is the agricultural end, to food being in my stomach, or at least in the household, in my fridge, it's like a leaky pipe, that this food is leaking out. I don't mean physical waste. Yes, some of it is physical waste, like the food that you throw away. But most of it is not physical. Most of it is financial. So it's a loss of value, if you like. And these are some of the things that we have seen in the food supply chains. I've been fortunate to map around 50 supply chains end-to-end. As part of Cardiff University, when I had the pleasure to be an academic, and also as an advisor to lots of retailers and food manufacturers. Okay, so there is a leaky pipe. I mean, I'm going to explain some of the aspects of this leaky pipe without naming any companies, without naming any particular retailer or food manufacturer. Here is one example. In this particular retailer, this is a ready meal going into a retailer. And you can see that side, you've got the food manufacturer, you've got the primary manufacturer. So this is the meat cutting and packing company. In the middle, you've got the ready meal food manufacturer. Then you've got the logistics. Then you've got the retailer. As you can see, these bars are showing the amount of waste, financial waste again. I'm not talking about the kilogram of food on the floor. I'm talking about the financial waste. What it's showing you is that 11.5% of the cost of making that product ends up in the bin, ends up being wasted. What it means is that if it costs me €1 to put this ready meal on the shelf, 11.5 euro cents end up being wasted before we put the product on the shelf. If you think about the retailers, on average, their margin is about 4%. If you think about the food manufacturer, on average, their margin is about 2–3%. So the collective margin in this supply chain is less than their collective waste. So they can, in other words, they can easily double the margins if they didn't have this much waste. Now, the shape of this diagram is interesting because I call it the bathtub. You see, it's like this. It's a lot in the primary manufacturing, and it's a lot in retailing, in the last 100 yards, the famous last 100 yards of the supply chain. This is a repeating pattern. I'm going to show quite a few examples. Here is another one. This is a soft fruit. Again, without naming any companies. You see, again, it's almost half a bathtub at least. So the retailer has got a lot of waste, and then the rest of it is a little bit spread. Again, in this case, 10.6 of the cost of putting that soft fruit on the shelf. Here is another example. This is a burger. Burger is arguably the lowest waste product you can find because the meat that cannot be used for anything else is downgraded to being minced and goes into burgers. So why should it even have any waste? And you can see 7% of the cost of putting burgers on the shelf. This is a horticultural product. It's 14%. Again, you can almost see the bathtub. Goes up, goes down, goes up again. So We've done about 50 of these. On average, you have between 10 to 20% of the cost of the product ends up being wasted. So it's a huge amount. If you think about, for example, the food industry in Europe, I don't know what's the turnover of the food industry in Europe. I think in the UK is 20 billion pounds or something. You can imagine 50%, 15% of 20 billion. It's a big number. And in Europe will be much bigger. So it's a huge amount of money being wasted financially. Is there anything we can do about it? Absolutely yes. And these are repeating patterns. The point is the waste is very repeating pattern. It's the same type of waste recurring in different industries, in different sectors, like horticulture, cereals, fruits, etc., etc. And it's also, importantly, the same points of leakage. Remember the leaky pipe. We know which points are normally the points of leak. And we know almost the solution for them. But of course, it takes some effort to do something about it. I'm going to talk about some of the most recurring ones very quickly, because I don't want to bore you too much. Now, if you look at this, one of the most common types of waste that we talk about is the concept of process capability, is giveaways. So here is a product. This product, for example, it was supposed to be 220 grams. This was a meat product. This is the specification that the retailer gives to the manufacturer. You cut a piece of meat that is exactly 220 grams, plus or minus 10. So anything between 211 and 229 is acceptable. This is what the manufacturer delivered. Of course, nothing fell below 211 because that was violation of minimum wage. And if the minimum wage is violated, you're underselling. That's not possible. But effectively, rather than having that curve nicely in the middle, everything should be in the middle. If this was a manufacturing industry like Airbus, everything would be Six Sigma right in the middle. This is the shape of the delivery. For consumers, this is also misleading because we have promised a number of calories that we have violated. So we have missold, we have misled. If we say we're giving you 220 grams, which is equal to a certain number of calories, we have given more, is misleading because we have an obese society more and more. This is a problem. Okay, so number one problem. Number two problem is that this is a huge amount of financial waste. Remember, this is waste. This is meat, and meat is a very expensive type of waste. So, what are we doing? If this is, who is paying for this? But you know, if you think about it, it's very unclear who really pays for this. Who absorbs this is very unclear. By the way, this is just one of many aspects of that leaky pipe that I'm going to talk about. I'm going to go through an example quickly and talk about some other aspects of the leaky pipe. Now, before I do that, remember, everything started in the food and drinks industry. Henry Ford, the second industrial revolution was mass production. The father of that was Henry Ford. He created flow production. He got his idea from here. This picture is a Chicago slaughterhouse where the first production line created by man was ever conceived in this industry. Henry Ford looked at that. He got his idea for flow production. He created that. He said, this is disassembly of a carcass. I want to reverse that. I am assembling cars. It's the opposite. I assemble cars. It's like reverse of disassembling a carcass. This was the idea. So everything started with food industry. But over the years, food industry has gone away from this opportunity. So if you want more information, there is a book and a book website that you can refer to. The presentation will be available. It's a free resource. If anybody want to download the case studies and videos, it's free of charge. You can go and do that. Now, what was the idea? We started a number of years ago. We thought, okay, the idea is that there is the idea of lean production, lean manufacturing, and then there is the idea of sustainability and being green. Okay, lean is about waste elimination. Green is also about waste elimination. It's obvious to put the two together. So we said lean is about focusing on one consumer and eliminating the famous different types of waste, or in Japanese it's called muda, defects, overproduction, too much inventory, too much movement. These are the famous operations management waste that you aim to eliminate in lean production. In the world of green, rather than having just one consumer, you have the society or very many different stakeholders. You focus on their needs and you eliminate different types of waste. So, famous 8 waste of lean, the muda, as I talked about just now. We said, okay, let's think about different types of waste. So at least on the surface, the two concepts were very similar. Now, we know the why, the problem. Why is it important? We talked about the why. There is waste in agri-food supply chains. You've seen it. It's between 10 to 20% of the cost of putting a product on the shelf. It's a huge amount. At least we have the why. Now we need to know how to fix it. And the how is a little bit more difficult. That's when you have to create a lean or a lean and green business system. You have to create a new culture in your organization. And here is what it is. It's about understanding processes, creating lean processes or value streams. It's about understanding the end-to-end supply chain, which I'm going to talk about. It's about strategy deployment, and it's about leadership and people engagement. It's a complete creation of the entire system that gives you a leaner and greener organization. You can't do just one. You have to do everything. And in the book, you will read about different case studies. For example, for each one of these sides of the model, we have chosen a different company that was leading, and they had good examples, and we have used them. However, right now, I'm only going to talk about one of the different sides of the model. Before I move on, why does it matter to talk about all different 4 aspects? Because obviously it's like human brain. It's got 2 sides. It's got the logos, the analytical side, and it's got the arty and soft and touchy and pink and fluffy side. So it's like everything else. You need to be healthy and smart. You need to be systemic, holistic, and analytic. You can't just be one of the 2. You have to have good leadership and people engagement. You also have to have lean processes. It's the complete combination that gives you a successful company. Now, in order to explain the rest of this, I think I'm going to focus on the supply chain example. And then after this, I'm going to talk about the process example. Here is the supply chain example. So we said one of the key aspects is supply chain or lean and green supply chain management. The leaky pipe, how to fix that. Now, what we did with the retailer, we got together as a team of senior managers from across the end-to-end supply chain. We brought all of the senior managers together, and we started walking the end-to-end supply chain, mapping it in detail, and creating a future state vision. We only had one important commitment, and that was nobody in the supply chain is too senior or too good to walk the end-to-end. It's a very important concept that everybody goes and sees for themselves. This is step number one. When I do these projects, I said we've done 50 of these end-to-end mapping. I always have only one rule, and that is everybody has to go and see the end-to-end. You have to walk it. Physically go and walk it end-to-end. Even if it takes 3 days, 4 days, that doesn't matter. And if somebody's not there, we don't do it. We say sorry. We wait until that person comes. This is to create commitment to change. Now, here is a typical value stream map of an end-to-end supply chain. I don't mean you guys read the detail, so don't worry about the detail. The idea of showing this picture is to show how complex it gets. You will have a product. In this case, this is the ready meal example that I showed earlier. The meat, muscle of meat that gets cut, goes into a ready meal food manufacturing that produces a ready meal steak. I don't know, in Spain, is it popular to buy ready meals, microwave food? Not very much, but you can understand what it is, yeah? And this is a very common food for lots of families, single individuals who go home in the evening, they want to eat something, they buy this from the local supermarket, they put it in microwave for 5 minutes and they cook it. It is extremely popular and it's very common. So it's cut, goes into food manufacturing, it's cooked, put into a tray, goes into the logistics system, and goes into a retailer. This is typically the physical flow, and this is the information flow in red, that when I go through the till, goes pip, it's indicating to the brain of the retailer that one product was sold. They have to replenish at least one product. And this, the information travels the opposite direction. And you can see how complex it is. And if you look at it, which one is more complex? The black, the physical, or the red, the information? I think you can all see the information. Guess why? Because it is. It's far more complex. Again, remember, this is an average of 1 year information that we have collected. So, within this, I think Ramón said this, within this picture, there is a lot of variation. So, if I collected the data that is on average, for example, productivity is 10 units per hour, for the sake of argument. Okay, this is an average number. The real productivity could be between 5 and 15. Or it can be even more variation in there. So, you collect this picture as a result of bringing a senior team together and get them to go dig deep under the data. What we collected was this picture that you've seen before. Is the bathtub, remember I talked about it? Is the percentage of the financial waste. So if the cost of the product was €1, 11.5 cents of that €1 was going into the bin, into the waste. It's almost a 50-50 split in this case. And in most cases it is. 50% of the waste is happening in the retailer. And 50%, around 50% of the waste is happening in the primary food manufacturer, where they take a muscle of meat and they cut it. Well, and there is a little bit in the middle, in logistics and in food manufacturing, but it's only a little bit. And this is typically what we find, actually. So, what do you think that is? It says out of life. Anybody a guess what that means? Yes, exactly. So it's a ready meal that says by 13th of June you have to buy it. If you don't buy it by today, this afternoon, the retailer have to throw it away. Some discount it. It's financial waste. Doesn't matter. Huge financial discount is huge waste. Some don't and throw it away. In either case, you have financial waste. This one here, meat, cut and pack, it says giveaway over specified cuts. What do you think this one was? Any guesses? Go on. Yes, it's not the same curve, it's a different curve, but yes, it's the same idea. In this case, the product had to be 65 grams, plus or minus 5. It ended up to be very similar to the curve that you saw earlier. It was way more than the maximum allowable. Okay, so by the way, now, here is what Ramón said. Automation is important, but we have to know why. So as we are doing this mapping exercise, we saw a butcher who grabs a morsel of meat, okay? And they grab a knife and they start cutting. They make a few mistakes. After 2-3 cuts, they get their eye in, so they get the 65 grams right. And then it's okay. So why do you think we have so much waste? What is causing this problem? Why can't we be always within the specification? Is it because it's manual? It probably is, right? It's a human being is making a mistake, right? It's plausible, that assumption. In fact, one suggestion from the team was that there is a machine that can do 3D scanning and laser cut. And you might have even seen these machines. It will take your waste from that much to 0. So somebody is suggesting go from that to 0 by using an automated machine. And you're there, imagine you're the lean advisor, what would you say? Would you say yes or no? Pardon? It depends. What do you mean? Yeah, exactly. So the cost was around 1 year return on investment. In fact, I'll tell you, this was around 149, let's call it 150,000 pounds waste, this bar here, annual terms. And the cost of the machine was around 200,000. So 150 plus the cost of the butcher who won't work there, just over, could be around just 70, 80. So just over 1 year return on investment. But you will never get to 0, by the way. But would you guys go and do it? Take that man out, put the machine in. You're the manager, it's your decision. What would you do? Yes or no? Of course it does. Yeah. Yeah. Well, the reality is that I said, let's hold on. Let's do some, as Ramón said, let's do some more measurement. And we did. After a little bit of measurement, without the butcher knowing what is happening, anonymously, it turned out this was actually, the guy was doing exactly what he was supposed to do. So he was within the specification. So what was wrong then? It had nothing to do with the accuracy of that process or process capability of that individual. In fact, that individual was good process capability in Six Sigma terms, good enough. The problem was the specification was given to him wrong. Somebody had forgotten the number is wrong on a piece of paper that is going down to the shop floor. And you might think this is a silly mistake. But actually, I have worked with many, many, many supply chains. In one sample of more than 30 supply chains, we found 85% of them had the same problem. They struggle to translate specifications to what goes exactly down to the shop floor. It's not an easy game at all. In this game, it was a simple mistake because there was a marination process in between and somebody had forgotten that the marination process reliably and predictably adds 16% weight to the product. that was exactly 16% extra weight. So it happens. By the way, had we put a 3D scanning and laser cutting machine in, we would have saved 0. In fact, we would have just added some more cost because of the maintenance and the cost of the machine, etc., etc. And somebody would have lost their job too. So that is the first step, is to get rid of that. This, in this case, was a simple change of specification. It's not always like that. In many, many cases, you have to work with your process capability. But first step is to understand process capability of the giveaways. Now, here, you saw the other around 40–50% of this waste, total waste, is there, which is the product expiring. In other words, sitting on the shelf with not enough shelf life or not enough demand, one of those two things. One of the key reasons this happens in supply chains is this effect. It's called demand amplification. It's a very systems dynamics type problem. I don't know whether you have come across this before, but it's a common factor in all supply chains that we work with. We know this since 1950s very well. It's very well studied and documented. What it says is that small changes in demand in the retailer will translate into huge swings in demand in the supplier. What it means is that in this case, the retailer's demand is varying around 26%, but the same retail orders going to the producer are varying by about 32%. The producer is packing around 34%. And actually, what the food manufacturer is passing to the primary meat cutting and packing plant is 44%. So you can see as we travel up the supply chain, our variation in demand is amplifying hugely. In other words, if the consumer buys a little bit more, what the producer 2 tiers up sees is a massive swing in demand. Why does this happen, do you think? What is the reason behind this? Absolutely, batching is a major issue. And sometimes it's also human intervention, interference with the systems, panicking. Oh, the sun is shining, I know tomorrow the orders will go up a lot. Guess what happens? In UK, sun doesn't shine, and the orders doesn't go up. Oops, I have accumulated too much inventory, now I panic even more. I reduce my orders radically. Oh no, now the sun is shining. And people are buying more product, and so on and so forth. This is very common. What I haven't seen is any supply chain yet to use this as a KPI for running the supply chain. And that might be a problem. By the way, there is another line that says 544. It's not to the scale, because it didn't fit on the page if I want to put it on the scale. What do you think that one is? No, remember, we are going up the supply chain. We went from retailer to food manufacturer. From food manufacturer, we went to the primary manufacturer. Now, what do you think that one is? The 544. This is actually, no, but this was actually the packaging producer, but that's a good guess. Yeah, so the packaging producer, what they do, they make 3 months worth of wraps or sleeves that goes around the product, the cardboard, for example. And then if we make a small change, adjustment to the logo or the color of the sleeve, we have to dump 3 months worth of production, which actually did happen and does happen every day in food industry. So guess what? The axis of evil of global warming is not just global warming per se, but it's also Betsy, meat. So meat production is a huge problem in that respect. Therefore, by reducing our waste, financial waste, we are also reducing our meat waste, which means we are reducing our global warming impact. Now, in other words, we have created a supply chain which is fresher, higher availability, lower prices, more consistent product, and less environmental impact. This was, I cannot reveal the numbers, but this was huge financial saving for this particular retailer. I am talking about millions, if not tens of millions, just in one single category. So this is when you go into the world of supply chain and system dynamics, your opportunity is always in the millions. Now, let me go back. For example, I talked about that. In order to fix that, you have to work with your data accuracy. Orders that go to your supplier, your food manufacturer, need to be far more accurate. In one case, we dealt with 3 million rows of data, and we need to create mechanisms for improving that data accuracy. In one case, we also have to improve, in this case, in fact, we had to improve the lead times. When you improve your lead times, by default, you reduce your demand amplification. So if your lead time, physical lead time, if the product takes 3 days to go from the manufacturer to the retailer, for example, if you reduce it to 2 days or 1 day, you have huge advantages in terms of the data accuracy and demand amplification. So remember, the problem, the shape of the problem is a recurring curve. We talked about the leaky pipe with various points of leakage. These are some of the most common types of leakage we've seen, and we have more or less found the same techniques for avoiding the leakage throughout the supply chain. So this was just one case study, quickly, of how to improve a supply chain. And there is more. If you go to the book website, you can download more, as much as the data confidentiality allows us to publish. And one of the key takeaways for me is that this is somewhere to start. At least understand the picture of where is my waste and which one to focus on would be the beginning, probably, for most of us. I am done with that one.
How can we reduce products out of life? I mean, what's better? Trying to reduce, trying to coordinate better the production with customer demands, or trying to increase in lifetime, in your opinion?
So, first one was production life, to increase it. What was the first one? Reduce the lead time. Yeah. Yes. Well, to be honest, both. If you can do, you have to do both. In this case, we did both. The lead time was 48 hours physically. We reduced it to 24 hours physically. That was one change. But that's not always easy to reduce the physical lead time in logistics. Sometimes you need to change the entire infrastructure of your logistics. And some retailers have done that. That's a huge investment. But the other way is to always ask, can I increase the actual life of the product? Sometimes that is possible with technology. And sometimes that is food technology, like some nitrogen on meat, for example. Sometimes it's IT technology that enables you to do that. In this case, was simpler than that, because I asked the first time, what is the life of the product? They said production plus 8. I have a habit of repeating the same question 25 times. And then when I kept asking it, they said, oh, P plus 9, so it was 9 days. Then I kept asking, and they said, oh, it's 10 days. So what happens because of the swings in demand, if you're a producer and you're so exposed, so I am the retailer, I'm giving you orders of 1,000 every day, but sometimes I'm not reliable, I go 1,500, sometimes I go 500. The swings mean that you have to protect yourself. How do you protect yourself? By potentially not telling me the truth about the life of the product. Cooking the meat, keeping it in the fridge, and pretending it's 8 days, but actually you always cook it 2 days in advance and you keep it in the fridge. Most food manufacturers have to do that, and do that actually in my experience, because of protecting themselves against the swings. We couldn't guarantee the swings won't exist, but what we could do is to work together, say, okay, you give 1 day to the retailer promise to give much more reliable demand data by use of technology, having visibility of the end demand, for example, and many other mechanisms you can use. So the short answer is both. Which one's easier? It really depends on the product. In this case, it was really easy to reduce the physical lead time, because we had to change a small thing in the logistical waves. In many cases, it's not the case. The logistics is very fixed depending on your infrastructure and existing technologies.
How much is it reduced in the last mile, this last cost of how you call this, sorry? Yeah, can you put the slide there? Yeah, this one, out of life, yeah, sorry. So how much does it reduce this cost, having the retailing online instead of having it in the proper store? I guess the inventories in the online system are much smaller than having the product distributed across 500 stores. So this will reduce dramatically, or in the reality it doesn't really reduce so much?
It does reduce dramatically, because the physical supply chain in retail industry doesn't hold anything much. For perishable products, it's normally cross-docking. It passes it through very quickly. Unlike manufacturing, because in manufacturing there is no guarantee, it's passed on to the consumer. But in this case, there was a guarantee. Just remember, typically in my experience, and lots of retailers use this as a rule of thumb, one day life is 1% less waste. So if that is in total 11, if you increase your shelf life by 1 day, however you can do that, you reduce 1% of that waste. That 1% is a huge number when your margin is only 4%. It's 11 goes to 10. So if my product life is 8 days, if I increase my product life to 9 days, if I can do that, let's say by better packaging or reducing the physical lead time, whatever I can do. If I can do that, then the 11 goes down to 10. Rule of thumb is about 1% for each day of life. This is the way you think, yeah.
I mean that increasing the useful life of products is a way to reduce this kind of costs. And my experience is that most of the agri-food companies are investing in this way. Yes. Because adapting the other way is very difficult. To know what is going to what is going to demand is absolutely impossible.
Yes. I think the first step, you're right, is to invest in that if you can. It's low-hanging fruit, you can quickly do something about it. Yes.
Thank you. I think this case study is very interesting because it shows the opportunities linked to try to improve performance in the whole supply chain, and also it's very interesting to see that I think that the starting point is to try to improve sustainability, but then when you start to work in operational performance in the whole supply chain, you really get really significant improvements in sustainability. And I think it's a good illustration. But what do you think about this? And just a question, it's not easy, this type of approach, because sometimes I think your experience is more to work with companies, isolated companies in some way. Okay, you have you are going to have into account the requirements of the customers and also suppliers. But this approach where you are trying to improve in the whole supply chain, sometimes it's not easy. I mean, I would like you to comment this experience.
Yes, absolutely. Short answer is yes. So I think two sides to your question. If you focus on the financial waste, the sustainability was improved, for sure. And the other way around too, if you focus, in fact, in this particular case, we were driven by the sustainability improvement that delivered significant financial improvements. Does not matter which one you start with, the other one should be improved. Because the relationship between waste and variations in the supply chain is stabilizing the supply chain, should deliver both. This is absolutely true, I agree with that. And the second question, I think, is... Yes. Yeah. Very few companies are prepared to go there. It's showing your dirty laundry to your supplier. If you're a supplier, it's showing your dirty laundry to your customer. It's extremely difficult from a change management point of view. And remember, the rule we had was that nobody is allowed not to show up. Everybody has to be there. The only reason is not because it's important to take a very senior person to a production line. Well, that is important, but the more important aspect is the commitment side of things. If there is no commitment, there is no change. And our problem was that there was not enough commitment to change in most cases, in my experience. In fact, Ramón said, people are excited by the technology, they might do it, but my question is, if you're really serious about it, why are you doing this? And this is the problem we have. Lean can be very sexy, very exciting, we want to do it, because the other company who is our competitors did it. But do we know why we're doing it? And that is extremely difficult. So if I take the 50 that we have done, maybe 10, maximum 15 were real success, 10, 15 were a disaster, and 10, 15 were somewhere in the middle. And you can know from the beginning, almost in the first few days, you know which one they are. 80% of your success in the first 20% of the effort. If they're serious, if they're having the difficult conversations from the beginning, if they're honest with each other, if they trust each other, you can tell from the beginning. But if they're not,
thank you very much.